All right, so now we're going to move on to just some tips and tricks in Jump. So really, these are just going to focus on reminding us about tidy data, pointing out some menu options that are available to us. How can we use the row selection to do smart things, revisit recoding, and if I have a graph, how can I get that into a Google Sheet? So I just want to really remind us again what tidy data is. So tidy data is this idea of having one line per, let's see, I was hoping I still have it out. Yeah, here we go. Having one line of data per row. So if we go back to this baby dragon example we have all this information in this row, but it only pertains to this dragon. If we go back to this leaf example where we have different species of leaves and we measured their leaf length, we have one leaf length per row. Compare that to how this data table was originally formatted, where we had 4 columns, each with its own species and measurements of that species. This is convenient for recording data, but it's not so great in a statistics program. And if you try to use this data in Jump in Graph Builder, you're going to quickly run into problems. And the biggest one that will run up is you can't do any statistics comparing these data sets. So if I wanted to do, say, a t-test, I don't have X and Y factors to compare against in this data set because everything is a Y factor. Whereas if I wanted to do that same analysis down here, now I can do, say, Y response. How does leaf length broken out by species affect things? And then I can do my means, which we'll do the means tests later more formally, but I can get statistics and see whether or not there are differences between these data sets. So really, really, really important when you're making data, when you're getting it into Jump, it needs to be this tidy data format. And if you want to read more about tidy data, um, just look it up. That's the title. It's made by the gentleman who created R and is running that statistics platform. It's a really great way of maintaining data. And just so you know, any data sheet that we provide in the course, at the very least in the chemistry labs, will be tidy data, and it'll be fairly ready for you to input your data and then export it to Jump. Because I don't want to make you guys spend too much time trying to figure out how to get data into Jump. I know I'm spending a lot of time on it now, but ideally your data will be ready to go from graph or sheet to graph. So let's go back. Let's look at the table menu. So in the event you are trying to work with multiple data sets or you need to fundamentally restructure your data, like you need to unpair data, you need to make it tidy, you need to join multiple data sheets together, this tables menu is your friend. So the tables will be here on Windows, on every window. On Mac, it'll be on your control bar. So there's a lot of powerful tools in here. We've already talked about Stack in the previous video. Stack is, if you need to restructure your table, you probably need to stack it. There are other options here. Split is an interesting one, which is basically unstacking data. So if you had data, I don't want to say you can use this to repair data because it might not necessarily have logic to how it does this, or it's not great logic, but there are situations where you might want to split. Summary is kind of useful. It'll give you the statistics of your table. Sort. I don't. If I want to sort, I just sort by clicking the column and clicking the sort button. I don't know why I don't see a sort button. Oh, here it is. Yeah, sort ascending, descending. You can do it here too. I think if you do it here, you can do multiple sorts. So like if I wanted to sort by, say, species and then column ID, it'll do that. So I have all 25 alloncinium, and then it'll do all 25 fajardium in that order. Notice whenever you use the table function, it makes a new table. Let's say you wanted to join two tables, so maybe I have two different sets of leaf measurements, and I want to make them one. Let's concatenate. So I have tables 4 and 5, add them together. Now I have one sheet with 200 rows in it. So the table functions are very useful if you're trying to figure out how to move whole tables around. The column menu, so just a reminder, our next objective has a lot of interesting tools in it. The ones that I use the most are going to be standardize attribute. So that lets you select multiple columns and change features about them. If you double click a column, you can get to their individual attributes. The standardize just lets you do multiple ones at a time. Sometimes I'll use pre-select roles. This probably isn't super useful in our course, but if you predefine roles, so like if I make this a, double click it. Do I? We just had it. Here we go. Pre-select role. So if I make this say an X column and this a Y column, and I try to do things and jump with them, it will default these to X, Y, and yell at me if I try to use them in other ways. I don't think it's that useful. Oh, put that back. So I'm going to remove those roles. I don't know if I can do it from over here. I don't think I can. We have, it's not in this data set, but this text to column, if you have like survey data with commas in it or something and you want to break apart that column, you can use this to split one column into many columns. This indicator column is also useful if you want to find out how many times something shows up in your data set. And then the major one are going to be column attributes. So if I go in here and go to column properties, this will be easier if I have a graph open. So by default, jump does some fairly basic things with your graphs. So if I have species down here or something, it's going to put them in alphabetical order by default. But maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want Jordanicus to be the first species. So I can right click my column, go to column properties, and I can tell it to give a value order. And this is the order jump treats these things in. So I just want to move Jordanicus up first. Watch over here, I hit apply, and it moves Jordanicus over here. Now, maybe I care about the color too. Maybe every time I run an analysis, I want Jordanicus to be a particular color. So maybe I want Jordanicus to be green, I want Alencinium to be blue, Fajardium to be red, and Preceptoria to be pink. Nope, I don't like that contrast. We'll go with orange, I guess. Apply. Now, this will happen anytime I make this graph. Let's see, are there other ones that are useful? Value label can, I think that's similar to a recode, but a soft recode. I would say order and colors are the ones I use the most. These other ones, you could use them. Lastly, there are formula columns. So these work just like formulae in Excel or Sheets, but rather than working per cell and you having to drag it down and apply it to all the cells, it just makes a column. So let's say I wanted to take leaf length and multiply it by 2. Apply, bam. So personally, I like to do all my math in Sheets and then bring it over to Jump. I'm more used to that workflow, and there are some things that I find easier to do in Sheets. But part of that is I probably just haven't learned how to do it in Jump. So I think that's the main point for column in the column menu. Now, row selection is a very powerful tool. So let's say I have my data set here. Um, I'm going to change my dots so they're dark variants just so that you can see them. Top of their uh, markers here. So let's get rid of this column. Let's say I don't want to look at preceptoria anymore. I'm bored of it. I'm tired of it, or it's just so wildly out of proportion to my other data that I don't want it anymore. There's a few ways I can select this data and get rid of it or hide it. So the easiest one is I can right click it, I can select matching cells, and I can just tell it to exclude this data. And you'll notice now it doesn't use preceptoria in my data, in my graph. Um, there are other ways I could do that. I could use this row selection tool. So I could select all my rows. I could select only my excluded rows if I want to bring those back. I can do select matching is what we just did. Select all matching will apply it to all of your data sets. But this select where one is also useful. So maybe I want to select my species where the text contains precept. And I forgot to set a column for that, which is why nothing happened. Let's try that again. Species. No, that was right. And add it. Add condition. And still giving me bonanzas. Maybe it's because I don't have the capital P in there. All right, we're going to check keep dialog box open, apply. There we go. Yeah. So it was case sensitive. These are selected again. I can exclude them. I can hide them, but hiding them doesn't get rid of this label. It just hides it on the column. So I don't usually hide things. I exclude them. You can hide and exclude. That's not so big a difference. And then there's one other row selection tool that's really useful, which is the data filter. So this one, we can add it here, and then we can actually just click on these to select them. And you can add more filters on here. So maybe I want to select only the preceptoria number 1. Uh, so data filter, I really like. One, one other, I should have put this on here separately as a keyboard command, but jump has all these red arrows in it, and these red arrows are where your sophisticated options are hidden to try to keep the screen from getting too cluttered. And these are there on map too. So one trick I really like is if you hold down the Alt or I think Function key on Mac and click the red arrow, it'll bring up all the options in that window. So I do this a lot on Graph Builder. I don't like to have titles or footers on my graphs. I'm gonna hit done here. So like if I put that title back, that pops up there. Sure, I can edit this and put whatever I want there, but in the sciences, our graphs have figure captions, so I don't need a title on top of my graph, which already has a figure caption. The other one is the footer. So this graph currently doesn't have a footer, but let's say I go through and I exclude all the data. That footer is going to tell me where those rows are excluded. So I don't normally want that. Another thing it can show, if I have an error interval on here, like a standard deviation, it'll tell me what that standard deviation means. Uh, Again, I don't want that in my final output, that information. Well, I probably won't tell people if data's like, in this case, I wouldn't tell people that I exclude the Jordanicus data necessarily, because there's probably a reason I didn't put it in there. Um, and the figure caption will tell me whether or not, like, what these error bars are. Recoding is our next objective here. So for recoding graphs or columns, this is really handy if you want to basically change variables or values within your column. So you can either recode in place or in a new column. Uh, Maybe I want to just anonymize these or relabel them for some purpose. I want a second category that maps these. I can recode these into a new column. It's very similar to find replace. If you do it within the column, you can find replace. What's really powerful about this and similar to find replace is we have this little drop down here. We have lots of options here. So if I wanted to convert to lowercase, if I wanted to convert to title case, uppercase, back to title case, you can get rid of white spaces and punctuation. You can, I have no idea what that does. You can use only the first word, only the last word. You can replace string, which is basically find replace. There's a lot of power in Recode, and it can be used very liberally and effectively. And then last, I just want to go over how to export a graph. Um, Let me pull up a Google Sheet real quick. All right, so I have my Google Sheet here. Let's say I want to get this graph into it. I have a couple options. The easy or the most formal one is I can export this graph as a PNG and save it to my computer and then upload it to the sheet. That's one option. I don't really love that. Another trick I'm going to do here is I'm going to hide all this redundant information. I like to copy my sheet to my clipboard and then just paste it in. It's pretty good about getting the resolution right. In this case, it's not doing a great job, actually. It's a little blurry, which I don't love. Alternatively, export image PNG. Next, I'll just dump that in my downloads. Uh, all right, headset turned off again because it idles after 15 minutes. For some reason, it's exporting it really small, which is unusual. Normally, it will export true to form as it is on here. So like I made it bigger there. Typically, it makes it bigger here. So not a great example. Give me a second. Okay, I have changed literally nothing. And if I copy paste it, it now comes through higher resolution for some reason. See, it's less blurry. Um, so I like, I usually just copy paste it into Sheets if I'm using that. If it's friendly to copy pasting a picture, if I have to put it on Canvas or something, I will have to download it and use it. There are other export options, but PNG and TIFF are probably the best. Those are high quality compressionless. I don't recommend the SVG or EPS. These are actually infinite resolution, but you need special software to use them, so they're not very useful for your purposes. And none of these other ones are actually all that great. Okay, so a little long of a tips and tricks, but just recap again. I cannot stress enough one datum per line. Use tidy data. This will save you so many headaches. The table menu has some cool tricks for restructuring data. The column menu and the column properties let you uh, change various aspects regarding your columns or manipulate your columns in ways that you might want to do but don't know how. Lots of row selection tools. I like select matching in the data filter. Recoding columns for when you got to change those variables. Or the one of the big cases where this is useful is, let's say you have a class data sheet, 12 different people are typing in scientific names, and people have 12 different spellings and capitalizations. You can use the recoding feature to correct all of those at once. So that's really handy. And then lastly, exporting graphs. Your graphs are going to have to make it into your post lab reports within our course. And trying to get them in there without getting them blurry or anything is normally not a big problem, but just check that they look clean, they look good. We do have a professionalism quality point or points on your reports, so try to make them look clean and professional. You might have to play with the axes. I don't like how this 10 is cutting off a little bit, so I might pull this down so it shows up better. And with that, thank you. We'll come back in the next video.